Hey guys, I'm back with another real estate video. This time, I'm going over my step-by-step guide on how to build an investment property. The example I'm going to give is for building a short-term rental to list on sites like Airbnb. But everything I'm talking about today applies to investment properties or really just properties in general. The first step is always to determine the overall budget for the entire project. This includes your land, your soft costs like architecture plans, engineering, and permits, the actual construction of the home, and then your furniture if you're planning on going the short-term rental route. If you're not paying all cash, and I think that's probably most of us, the most straightforward way to determine your budget is to speak to a construction lender early on in the process. They'll do a pre-qualification so you can figure out how much you can borrow and also get an idea of how much cash you're going to need to put down. Knowing how much cash will go into the investment is important for when you go to calculate your projected cash-on-cash return, which we'll go over later. The next step is to evaluate neighborhoods where you want to build. Make sure to only spend your time researching neighborhoods where the average home value is relatively in line with your overall budget. Building a home is usually cheaper than buying an existing home in the same neighborhood, but use the average home value as a rule of thumb for approximately how much it's going to cost you to build a new home. If you're planning on going the Airbnb route, a critical part of evaluating a neighborhood is checking local regulations on short-term rentals. Many popular tourist destinations are placing a cap on short-term rentals or banning them entirely, so you absolutely need to know that information before making an investment decision, as it could drastically change your income potential. Many of you may also be planning on building an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, along with a main house. In this case, make sure you check whether or not you're allowed to rent both units in the way that you want to. For instance, I've seen several areas that only allow one unit per property to be rented as a short-term rental. If you're building a short-term rental, look at comps or comparable properties in the same neighborhood. You can do this manually by using websites like Airbnb and VRBO to get information on nightly rates and occupancy levels. It does take a little bit of work to dig up this info manually, but you can just pay for a month of access to a data aggregating service like AirDNA to easily get the info for you. Just make sure to consider seasonality when you're modeling rates and occupancy in your analysis. So, after you've chosen one or two target neighborhoods, go out and get quotes from as many local home builders as you can to get an accurate estimate of the construction cost. This step is going to be a critical part of your budgeting process, as it will make up the majority of the total cost of the project. When I was searching for a builder for my short-term rental, I had to talk to at least 10 different contractors before I could find one that would build the house that I wanted for the cost that I needed to fit within my budget. When you're interviewing builders, make sure you get the total cost of construction so you can accurately analyze your deal. So make sure to ask them if their cost includes permit fees, or will you have to pay for those separately. This next step is often overlooked, but I think it's highly beneficial to you as an investor to analyze the deal at this stage as if the house is already completed. Try and find the home values of similarly sized houses that were built in the last couple of years. Ask yourself this important question: is the house that you're going to be building worth more than the cost to build it? It better be, or it's not worth all the time and energy it's going to take to complete the project. You might as well just buy an existing home right now. I touched on the concept of cash-on-cash return. Your projected cash-on-cash return will depend on the total amount of cash that you anticipate having to put into this investment, as well as the projected income and expenses generated by the finished property. Again, you can use sites like AirDNA to get your numbers for projected revenue, and you should be able to calculate your expected expenses. I can go more into how I analyze an investment property in a future video if anyone is interested. Assuming your analysis checks out and your target neighborhood allows you to rent your property as you wish, then it's time to buy land. This is where the big commitments start to happen, and I have a few videos dedicated to explaining how to find land and then different ways of purchasing that land. Knowing your overall budget from earlier and how much your construction cost is going to be from talking to builders will allow you to properly budget for your land. In addition to checking local regulations on rental property restrictions, you better be absolutely sure that you can build on this land before you buy it. So check with the building department for any restrictions on this specific parcel. Land is significantly harder to resell than developed property, so you don't want to be stuck with an unbuildable lot when you could have just checked with the county before purchasing it. Because of this risk, many prospective buyers of vacant land decide to get key site valuations prior to committing to buy, just to make sure there aren't any protected salamanders living under a rock on the property. I'm not kidding. I've heard horror stories where something like that can derail an entire project. In fact, I almost had a single tree prevent my project from getting off the ground, but thankfully that got resolved after a back and forth with the building department. In my opinion, the next step is where the fun happens, and that's designing the house. It's up to you whether you design the house with an independent architect, or in my case, my builder was also my architect. It really just depends on your specific vision for the property and what types of design you gravitate towards. I wanted something that looked mid-century and modern, but also still looked like a cabin since it is in the mountains. And that style is what my builder specialized in designing and building. If you're going to go to the trouble to do an Airbnb, make sure to design the house with a short-term rental in mind. When you build new, you have the unique opportunity to create a purpose-built property that's ideal for guests. The next step is to go ahead and actually choose a builder or contractor to build your property. If you're planning on funding the construction with a mortgage, then your lender is most likely going to require that you sign a fixed contract with your builder. If you're paying cash, then you have a lot more flexibility in how you can structure your contract with your builder. But I will say it is nice to have all the prices for materials and labor fixed up front, so that there really aren't any surprises later on. Also, make sure you make it a point to tour at least a few of your chosen builder's previous projects to make sure that the quality of their work is up to your standards. Nothing is going to be worse than investing a ton of time and money into completing a project only to find that the workmanship is terrible at the end. The next step is to get a construction loan if you're not paying all cash for the project. Make sure you take a look at all-in-one construction loans or construction to permanent loans, which are loans that convert to a 30-year mortgage upon the completion of the build. If this is your first time building in an area, then you can likely qualify for a second home construction loan. This is the way to go if you can get one, because the interest rate will be lower and you can usually put less cash down. Now, if a second home construction loan isn't an option, then you can always get a loan meant for investment properties. Just expect to pay a slightly higher interest rate and you'll probably be required to put more money down. Once you figure out the financing, you should file your permit application. Oftentimes, people apply for permits and their construction loan at the same time, so the exact order between the two doesn't matter too much. Usually, your builder or engineer will file the permit application for you, but if not, then just make sure you get it done. Waiting for permit approvals can take a long time. On average, I'd say 4 to 16 weeks depending on your local building department's resources and their current queue of permit applications. In my case, it took 6 months, but that's a story for another time. Don't hesitate to reach out to your local building department in advance to learn about their lead times. And also make sure you know the permit fees in advance, since they can make up 3 to 8% of the total projected cost. After you receive your permit approval and you've secured financing for the construction, it's time to build the house. This will be the time when you start to pick all of the finishes for the interior and exterior of the house. This includes every detail from the exterior siding material to the kitchen faucet. Your goal should be to make the property feel as high-end as possible while staying within your predetermined budget. Let me know if you'd be interested in a video detailing the actual construction phase. The duration of construction can vary widely, but a good rule of thumb is 1 year. If you're going to list your brand new rental property as a short-term rental, then you'll have to account for furnishing the entire house. So make sure you've budgeted for this, either in your construction loan or by setting aside cash, and expect to pay around $10 a square foot to properly furnish your place. So with all that said, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have a good one.